Good afternoon. I'm Rob Grimes, the CEO of the International Food and Beverage Technology Association, and along with the National Restaurant Association, I'm very pleased to welcome everyone to today's gathering on how gaining customer data requires new communication initiatives. Before we get started, let me go ahead and share a few housekeeping items. First of all, you should please turn off your video and mute your audio. Also, you should probably make sure that besides your audio being muted, in case you forgot to do that, that your phones are muted, which is note to self on that one. You can submit any questions or comments via the chat button at the bottom of your screen. And you should send it you're going to be sending it to the panelists and organizers as well. You should refrain from asking any questions that regard sales, pricing, that make political commentary or any disparaging remarks. And there is a recording of this webinar. It's going to be made available after the session is over at the ifbta.org and through the Expert Exchange at the National Restaurant Association website, and also through social media and other partners. As far as our agenda today is concerned, we're going to start out with a panelist and with partners and panelists where we'll be discussing today's topic. After that, we're going to break out into breakout rooms, and you're going to have the opportunity to talk amongst your peers and continue the conversation that is facilitated by some facilitators who will take some notes so that you can continue to talk about what we discussed today. From that, we will reconvene, and the facilitators will give a report to the whole group of the findings. And you should know, actually, after the session is over, we'll be compiling some notes and things that you will receive as well. But first, let me introduce Lo Maidobon of the NRA and ask her to please give a welcome and an overview.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much, Rob. We are delighted to welcome you today with our partnership with IFTA. It's the second gathering we have been doing together. Just wanted to give you some overview on what we do at the association. I'm sure plenty of you know about it, but sometimes we do forget some of the key elements. So one of our important element is working with and for our members, operators, in order to make sure we understand your needs and objectives, and we develop products, programs, services, and benefits what ensure this success for you and for what you are doing. Obviously, with the current state of things, the current and the past 8 months situation, we are hoping what gathering like what we are doing today is being very helpful and allows you to learn more about what is available. We also advocate on behalf of the industry members with national, state, and local policymakers, and as members, you are receiving regularly some elements and some requests for calls to help when we go and talk to Congress. And of course, overall, I ought to mention what we are the largest restaurant and food service industry association in the world, representing over 1 million restaurant locations across the nation. So thank you so much again for being here. Looking forward to the next 45 plus minutes, and I will see some of you in the breakout. Thank you.
Thank you, Lo. And I should point out that the Restaurant Association also has some specialty pages on their website with resources due to COVID, but also they are really working very, very hand in hand with each of the individual states and with your operations to make things happen during a very challenging time for all of us. And the IFBTA is very pleased to be working with the National Restaurant Association and Lo specifically on these initiatives. The IFBTA itself is a not-for-profit trade association. We are focused on food and beverage technology, of course, but the promotion, networking, and education, but also working hand in hand with industry association leaders like the National Restaurant Association, who can use our support hand in hand to enable technology for use in the industry. Our membership is open to all, both operators and suppliers. Everyone has an equal seat at the table. We are a global organization that focuses on regional and local chapters, but also we have a virtual chapter, and when there are industry events that are not virtual, of course, we try to bring members of the industry together to share and meet amongst their peers as well. We also have a certification program that's specifically made on introducing food and beverage technology, and there are many industry partnerships and support, and one of the proudest, of course, that we're happy with is the National Restaurant Association. With that, let me recognize our title sponsor, not only for this gathering, but the one that we held about a month ago, Fortinet. And I'd like to introduce Courtney Radke, who's the CISO for National Retail for Fortinet, to say a welcome. Courtney?
Hey, Rob. Thanks for having me. Been a little bit. So yeah, I'm Courtney Radke. I'm the CISO for National Retail at Fortinet, and I lead technology development and outreach for the retail vertical here. I'd like to thank everybody for joining the session, and a special thanks to our speakers and the IFBTA. For those that don't know Fortinet's mission is to deliver the most innovative, highest performing, cost-effective network security fabric for retailers and restaurants, and really simplify your IT infrastructure. We provide solutions such as network security, SD-WAN, switching and wireless, really for all businesses and all shapes and sizes, the most deployed, validated, and patented solution provider out there to cover the entire digital attack surface. So I know that we're all looking forward to this session, as am I. So that's a brief introduction of Fortinet. We appreciate everybody for joining. And with that, I'd like to turn it back over to Rob Grimes.
Great, thank you. And also I should point out that not only is Fortinet a title sponsor of the gatherings, but they're also both a global industry partner of the IFBTA and an allied member of the National Restaurant Association. So they're really supporting our industry all the way around. But with that, why don't we get down to the meat of the subject today? And I'd ask our speakers to please turn on their video and their microphones, and we're going to go ahead and get started. Now, just as a reminder, we would ask you if you have questions, and we know some people have submitted questions already, you can do that through the chat function. And there will be time at the end where we will go through the questions. But in the meantime, we're going to have a moderated Q&A session. But to do that, we really need to start with an introduction of our panelists. And so I'm going to ask each of our panelists to introduce themselves, their company, and a little bit of perspective on this subject today, which of course is a very important subject and opportunity for us as well. And Don, why don't we start with you, since you're my boss on the board of the IFBTA, I need to defer to you.
Well, I appreciate that. Sure, I'll go first. Don Zimmerman. I'm currently the CIO at Landry's Entertainment here in Houston. Been here just a little over 4 months. So I'm still new to the job, new to the company. But the company was a customer of mine, because prior to coming here, I was with NCR for 5 years and worked in the technology provider field. Before that, I was a CIO at Wendy's and Arby's for about 10. And in the retail specific world, 10 years before that. So a fairly complicated but diverse set of experiences that all kind of come together and help me do what I do here today. So like I said, I've been with Landry's for 4 months. It's a very unique company if you don't know it, but you probably know many of our brands. We've grown through acquisition. We've got about 60 different restaurant concepts. The biggest of which is 90 units. So a lot of various sets of restaurants that aren't all that big in and of themselves. But we also have hotels, various entertainment venues and resort locations and others. We own the Golden Nugget casinos. So there are 5 of those across the country. We own the Houston Rockets. And so it's a combination of a lot of things, but the thread that binds it all together, other than our ownership, is the fact that a consumer may be using or have an affinity to one or all of these different companies that we have under the umbrella. And with that really points to the data, because we've grown through acquisition, we've got a lot of data, but most of it's locked into the various transaction systems. So we're on a journey right now, and it's really a high priority to turn that data into insight and get to the point where we have a 360 view of all these customers and truly can enable a one-to-one marketing relationship. So we'll talk more about that as we go through the day.
Great, thank you, Don. And next, Alan, would you like to take the reins?
Happy to. Good afternoon. Alan McGee. I am the VP of Digital Marketing and Technology for Church's Chicken. If you don't know much about churches, we're an almost 70-year-old iconic fried chicken QSR with about 1,500 locations globally, founded in San Antonio, Texas, but headquarters here in Atlanta. And I came in about 2 years ago to take the brand through a digital transformation. And so that's everything that a guest engages with on a screen outside of the restaurant, including paid media, CRM, social, web, all of our e-commerce and ordering. And that's all pretty inclusive of data from many different resources, all driving to how do we use this to be smarter marketers and have an impact. So similar to what Don said, a lot of our digital transformation has been around getting clean data, getting the right data from our various sources. How do we integrate it all together? And then how do we utilize it to make meaningful and actionable marketing plans? We're on this mission to move from what I'd say is one-to-all marketing to one-to-one marketing. And it's a combination of the right data, clean data, the right technologies, and then turning that into action that ultimately results in sales. And that's what we've been really focused on the last 2 years here at Churches. Great.
Well, thank you very much. And that brings us to Warwick. So Warwick, why don't you take it away?
Yeah, thanks, Rob. Thanks everybody for having me today. So my name is Warwick Mclaren, originally from Melbourne, Australia. If you're hearing a bit of a twangy, funky sound there, it's been 17 years now since I moved over here from Australia. But I'm with GFG, Global Franchise Group. So our portfolio of brands consists of Round Table Pizza, Great American Cookies, Marble Slab Creamery, Pretzel Maker, and Hot Dog on a Stick presently today. So I'm the VP of Omnichannel Marketing, so very similar to Alan's role, so overseeing a lot of the technology infrastructure across our brands and getting those set up, as well as the marketing orchestration that comes from those pieces that come together. So like Don and Alan, our mission is really very much the same in that we're trying to get to a single customer view. With our data, we're really trying to understand how our guests are interacting both offline and online, and really understanding the channels that are quite frankly, influencing conversions at the end of the day. So I think it's the challenge that everybody's got is we're all sitting on data. It's how do you move it across the, the different ecosystems to fundamentally get into a position where you can have a meaningful conversation with the guest, which hopefully will increase guest engagement and conversion at the end of the day. So excited to get into it. I know it's a meaty topic, so excited to have the discussion today. So thanks again.
Great, thank you. So I want to thank each of our panelists for that introduction, which actually leads us into our discussion. And again, if you have questions you'd like to submit, you can submit them in through the chat, and we'll talk about them on the Q&A pod. But here's something that sort of strikes me when I hear this. I've not heard one-to-one marketing for years as an actual subject. And for some reason, each of the three of you have actually talked about either using the term one-to-one marketing or personal marketing in there. And I'm just sort of wondering, first of all, if we're going back now and looking at that, because it's got to be at least 10 years since that term was really widely used, what's different today that is bringing that back around? Is there something new in the data that's available to us that just suddenly happened all along, or is it really a focus on what we need? And Alan, I think you're the one who surfaced it as the official term first, so maybe you want to address that.
Sure, yeah, happy to. And yeah, it is a term, Rob, that has come back around, and it's a combination of things. One is the technologies and the data. So we're getting now information on our guests, whether they're coming into the restaurants, whether they're ordering online, the growth of e-commerce, of their activities, whether it's web-based, whether it's social media-based, CRM. I think in the past, brands were really focused on that one-to-many message, so same message for everyone. And now that we have all these data points, we can use it to get down to more personalized messaging. Everything that we talk about internally is if we can get to 3 levels of personalization with a message. And one of them can easily be a name or a location or a product. That is going to increase your conversion rate significantly. And so being able to use that data and get to one-to-one, it's a lot easier today. And technologies, just in the last 2 or 3 years, I feel like there's a lot more technology partners that can consolidate and integrate this data to make it really usable. It really wasn't that usable in the past. And honestly, we probably didn't have a lot of good usable data to do one-to-one marketing.
Great. Warwick, you also, really talked about that amongst the stores and the brands that you have. Do you want to address that as well?
Yeah, no, I mean, and Alan hit on all the big notes for sure. I mean, I think it's, there's so much data that's available. And I think for most people that are probably on the call today, I mean, the single source of truth is the POS. I think that's really been the struggle for a lot of us over the years is we may have a franchise system. There might be multiple POS systems. How do you, extrapolate that data out, to aggregate it all into a single source? Like that's been very difficult to do. So it's certainly become easier now. There's customer data platform layers that can go into a CDP, which certainly now makes it very, very easy to start to see, who is the guest, what channel are they interacting on, how much are they spending, what are they buying, so that it can be passed now through to these engagement platforms. So we can start to say, hey, look, Rob likes pepperoni pizza. He typically buys on a Friday night. And I can have a conversation with him now that really speaks to the things that he likes and how he likes to interact with the brand. And so I think that's really where, the marketing's pivoting to now. Retail's been doing it well for a long time. And I think that as food service operators, we're just now starting to get into that game. I know Alan comes from that space, so he's probably got some good nuggets to share there too. But I think that's just kind of where it's going now.
So, each one of you come from a different background and perspective. And I have a strange feeling that in Don's world, which includes hotels and casinos and some other things, he might argue that the POS may or may not be the single source of truth, depending upon which world it's in. But it is a data point, plus we could have a whole discussion on online order. I guess it's where it connects first. But you must have that challenge, Don, as to where, in fact, the data comes and how do you share it across multiple types of industries and operations.
Yeah, I agree with you. And to your point about the POS, I would say there are many different points of sale where the transaction actually takes place in a business that has the diversity that ours does. So it's certainly an originator. We want to put it into a place that is the source of truth for the customer about Rob, or the information about Rob, whoever the customer is, and then utilize that at future points of purchase when Rob is either anticipating or making a decision to do some business with us. And so that's really the game. And, it does have a lot of variation. And I would not sit here and say we've got it all figured out yet, but it is our digital transformation journey. And I think it's critical. And to your other question, we talked about this at Wendy's 8 years ago, to your point about the term, but the technology and the data wasn't all available yet. And we knew we wanted to get there. But I think what's really accelerated it is the digital channels that consumers are doing much more of their business in. And when you do that, the data is much more attributable to who's actually out there.
Yeah, digital transformation and digital, as a term, seems to be the hot one going into next year, even for budgets, right? And I know we have a lot of marketing people on this call. Warwick, since I commented on it, I also realized that in your background, as Don has just pointed out, the term point of sale also means many different things. And I know you worked with some consumer products and some things like Pepsi that certainly also had the POS, and there are a lot of sources of data, but you also did retail. And I'm just sort of wondering if there's something, because you mentioned it, is there something we should be learning that came from one of those other industries that they do well that you finally think we can take advantage of?
Well, I think, again, I think some of the differences between retail, and QSR is, the buying cycles are very different. Retail can be a lot longer buying cycle. So, there needs to be a longer conversation. Sometimes it needs to happen depending on what it is that you're trying to ultimately sell to the guests. So I think what we've certainly learned from retail is just, it's the volume of personalization that, typically happens. I mean, you think about, the experiences we all have today with hotels, airlines, the golf club or the pair of jeans that followed you all around the internet after you've looked at it. So, I mean, all of these things are tactics that retail have really honed in on well, because they understand that that conversation has to continue. And I think with the food service industry, it's typically, as Alan said, it's always been spray and pray or batch and blast, whatever term you want to use. And it's all geared around, I've got to get that transaction and get it now. But what happens after that transaction has happened? When do you typically see that guest again? And that's where the conversation, I think, becomes very meaningful. And those are a lot of learnings we can take from retail.
Okay. Well, Alan, since Warwick actually mentioned this in your light as well, I get it how personalization can work in a casino and a hotel. And I get it how it certainly works in pizza, but you're chicken.
Yeah.
So how are you going to use one-to-one and personalization and use that data to create that experience in a chicken business?
Well, there's a lot of ways, and chicken's not homogenous. We've got people that love fried or bone-in fried chicken. We've got people that like tenders, that love our new chicken sandwich, or come in and really are fans of the biscuits. And so one of it is just understanding their preferences. Is what do they order? Is it lunch combos? Is it large family meals? And are they ordering every single Sunday, or are they coming in multiple times? So understanding I'd say the behavior and the patterns, that tells you a lot about the guest, and it gives you those points to message them. So if I know a guest comes in every Friday, or they're a weekend guest, why would I send them an email or start to market to them on Monday and Tuesday? Why wouldn't I market to them on Thursday, Friday, Saturday as they're getting closer to that point of purchase? Because we know everyone has to eat 3+ meals a day. And how do we keep the brand and that guest consideration set as it gets closer to the time when they're going to want to be thinking about getting fried chicken? They may not order out Monday through Wednesdays. And so it's really about the right timing and as close of the right message as possible. And then you can use those other levers like loyalty and offers and promotions and those type of things that are going to hopefully close a deal or get them a little further down the funnel. So that's kind of how I think about how it comes to life. And it's, I like to say, it's not rocket science, but it is kind of rocket science to get it done.
So, Alan, let's just stick with this because everybody's got a history, right? And you have a history, having worked with some other multi-brand concepts, but also I believe you have a history in the hotel industry as well. Is there some learning that we should be taking on the use of data and personalization that comes from hotels who pretty much focus on that sort of thing and have had loyalty out there a lot longer than most people in food service?
Yeah. And the hotel industry is a great example. It's a little bit different, I will say. When you think about travel, in most cases, when people are thinking about travel, they're saying, I'm going to take a trip. And then what you want your brand to be is in that consideration set of where am I going to go and where am I going to stay? And your brand has to come in there in that scenario. It's not so much, I want to go stay at the Intercontinental in Montreal. It doesn't kind of work in that order. And so by being able to understand those preferences as people are searching, then you can try to serve them up the right message. And also it's looking at occasions. When do people typically take vacations, or business travelers? What are markets that they're typically going to, and what days? And setting up preference centers. People are really good about giving travel companies your information. I bet most people on here probably on their Delta or United or American Airlines profile, check, I don't want a middle seat, right? Or I prefer an aisle or a window. And those little preferences then allow you to be able to market and then to find other opportunities to upsell or to sell on a like destination that you went on vacation last year. Last year you went to Aruba. Let's try to sell you on somewhere that we know our guests have went to Aruba and then they've went to this other destination. So it's just using more of that AI and intuitiveness to then be able to get that right message in front of the guest that they're pretty close to. You just need to push them there a little.
Right, but people in the airline industry and in the hotel industry were always used to giving up a lot more data about themselves because of the connections and things like that than they have been in food service, although things have changed. But before we get on that particular subject, Don, you have a rather unique perspective here because you've worked with very large global brands. You came from retail, and then, as you pointed out, you spent 5 years with NCR as their chief technology officer. And so you sort of see it from both sides. You see the collection of data, you see how it has to funnel in. And I'm sort of curious about your perspective on the various data points and how we should be, how people, the opportunities that they should be considering that they could leverage that they may or may not know.
There's a lot in that question, Rob.
Sorry.
I think, and we've probably all seen it, data's the new oil, if you like that kind of analogy or whatever, but there's so much information, and data properly turned into insight is where the wealth is. And from our view, we keep it pretty simple, right? Can we put names on the data? Can we tie the data to a person? In the hotels, it's kind of hard to be an anonymous customer of a hotel. There's going to be a name tied to that reservation, to that room, to whatever you do there. But food service, to your point, hasn't always been that way. And being able to now, through the digital experiences that customers are more and more utilizing with their food service, we can do the similar things. And so, I think it's a very interesting challenge, especially when you have a diverse business. In those hotels that we own, because we own some completely, we've got all the data because it's ours. Those that we franchise, have a little different perspective. And that's more of a negotiation and depends on the agreement you have with the franchisor. So I don't know that there's one answer to your question, but I do think that anybody who recognizes it, or if you're not recognizing it, you need to. There is so much power in being able to tap whatever the data source is. And it might be something as obscure as, location data, right? But if we can get that through the proper permissions and all that, there's a lot of insight you can start to put together when you can identify who's where and what time they're there, and now can make a pitch to either bring them into your door, or once they're in the door, know what you can do to maybe increase the check or get them to come back on another day. To Alan's point, I think the sky's the limit. And we thought that on the NCR side. Data has been a big part of the strategy there, but also now on the usage side, it's power.
So first of all, I'd remind our audience that we're going to go to Q&A in about 5 minutes. So if you have any things you'd like to submit, please do that. But, Don, you've opened up a number of other subjects. And Warwick, today you were working primarily in the pizza business. And pizza always was known for knowing how to connect, especially because of taking online orders, deliveries, but also the complexity of people's preferences in pizza were probably more so than anybody else in the industry. And I'm sort of curious about your perspective on the data sources and what is really available when you have a direct connect. And by the way, has COVID, for instance, created an opportunity for you to have more data than you had before?
Yeah, there's no question about that. We've seen so many more consumers now shift to online ordering. Definitely that's happened this year, and it's just a byproduct of, what's happened, unfortunately, this year for everybody. So I think there's no question that because of that, the volume of data that we're getting is so much better, because, that transactional level data, data that comes through, to Don's point, we're getting, a lot of customer data that has to be passed through because of the e-commerce transaction. So there's no question about that. So I think, to your point, there's a lot of information we get, in the pizza space, just because of the type of products that consumers order. But, I think, as Don said, it's what you do with the data at the end of the day. It's, how can I get that information into, business intelligent tools to really start to understand the buyer behavior that's really happening with users. So, the customer journeys are so different based on what really influences the guest to purchase at the end of the day. And that can change based on age demographics or a whole range of different factors. And so being able to get that data into tools so you can understand what's fundamentally getting guests to move, where are the bottlenecks, that is the magic that is now available. But, Alan said it as well. It is very much rocket science in trying to pull this all together, because there's just been limited resources, quite frankly, or tools that can connect to all the systems very well. So, I know there's probably people screaming at the computer saying, yeah, well, how do you do it? So I'm not sure if that is something we'll get into today, but, I totally understand it's a huge frustration for a lot of people.
So you have this magic way of queuing up like the next subject and the speaker in there. So I'm not forgetting the how do you do it piece. But what I would like to do is maybe there is a special sauce or some how do you do it. And Alan, if I recall, you're 2 years in churches, and I believe it wasn't COVID that started your transformation. I think you said that you've been on a journey to pull this together. So you must be working on how do you do it. And so the question was churches prepared, or what have you put in place over the last 2 years in order to how do you do it? And is there something to that?
Yeah, it's very much there's something to it. And when I came in the door about 2 years ago at churches, I'd say we had a very disparate, non-integrated data system. We had partners that didn't talk. We had strategies that weren't aligned. And our approach was a little different. I had some carte blanche to say we have to knock this house down, and we have to rebuild it from the ground up. And we spent year one rebuilding a lot of things like our website and listings and CRM, and then started to stand up things like e-commerce and ordering online. And so a lot of that was all building at the same time, and then starting to move us into a CDP, like Warwick said. And I wasn't even thinking about CDP in year one, but it definitely has to be phased, and you've got to be able to have the right partners that all talk and integrate, and that is probably the biggest challenge. So when the pandemic hit, we were able to be very agile and nimble, and use our channels to be able to shift to e-commerce where we could. And I'd say our journey set us up to be successful and to keep our head above water for most of the year with our to-go business. And so I think brands that had been delaying that or saying, we don't need that, we're solely focused on in-restaurant, there was a lot of catch up they had to play. And luckily, we were ahead of that by about 18 months.
And were your franchisees prepared as well, or did you have to bring them up to speed as well?
I'd say most of it was above the franchisee level, so above the restaurant level from that technology perspective. But for most of our franchisees, we had rolled out delivery, and most of our restaurants had 3 to 4 delivery partners pre-pandemic. So it was more of where the volume is. We had online ordering rolling out. We had a lot of these other technologies in place. So for them, it was more of a shift of more through the drive-through or more e-commerce and just less in the dining room. So it's more of a shift on property, but there wasn't, I'd say, big infrastructure changes we had to make.
Well, there's certainly a lot of different pieces to it. We do have some questions from our audience, and we're going to shift to the Q&A before we go to the breakout rooms. And, the first one that started is coming from international. And so, Don, I'm going to go ahead and send this one over your way to start, and anybody else can go ahead and chime in on it. But as we take a look at data privacy, because we are talking about data, right? And we're talking about a lot more data. And I think Warwick said there's a whole bunch more data, right? So we have a data privacy question as far as it relates to how do the new data privacy regulations affect a operator's ability to see, and I'm going to add in, and use the data, especially also if there, is there a need for a central data warehouse, or how are you going to do that as well?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question, and whoever asked the question must have been in my office yesterday, because we had a big meeting about this just yesterday, and we're working our way through that. But I think it has to comply. And we also expect and pretty much know that the compliance definition will evolve. So it's not just, hey, we got it, now we're done, we can ignore it for the next 5 years. It's going to have to be a key integrated part of every decision we make relative to use of the data. You do have to get it in one place so that you can have a source of truth. And if a customer says, forget me, as some of them can, you truly have to be able to do that. Or make sure you're following their wishes and all that. So it's absolutely a part of it. It's got to be a part of the design, which is what we're going through right now. And then, as I've talked to my staff, we can't just design it, put it in place and move on. Who's going to be the czar of consumer information compliance ongoing? And that's still to be worked out here. But
And I'm just sort of thinking about this. I'm not so sure that a person's ever forgotten, because some industries and some data, and Warwick or Alan, you might have a comment on this, but there are so many sources of data that even if the person wants to be forgotten specifically to you, you may actually still be knowing and getting information on that person through other feeds that are coming through, because there's certainly multiple sources and partnerships that go on. Alan or Warwick, do you want to comment about that and data security in light of that?
Yeah, I mean, I think again, and Alan, feel free to chime in here too. I mean, I think it's the one big nugget that I cannot stress enough, to everybody that's on the call today is like, you have to own your own data. And I think this is what's happening now is that, first party data is kind of the term that's you kind of hear it now, is going to be so critical going forward. You have to have it. Third-party data, which typically comes through pixel tracking and these sort of things, is going to be obsolete. It's becoming a huge problem with privacy, where we're, leaning on, digital partners to kind of do right, in terms of how they're using that data, but it gets sold, and these things have all come up in legislation. But so again, I think owning that data is so critical, because the privacy laws, what's happening with CCPA out in California, it's just the tip of the iceberg. It's going to run across the country. We know it's going to, just like it did with GDRP in Europe. So owning that data is so critical, so that you have complete control to know where the guest is coming from. But ultimately, with privacy, if the guest chooses to opt out or doesn't want to be marketed to in a certain way, you're going to have those protections in place to ensure that the guest has been removed and is not going to be receiving information they don't want.
And by the way, since you brought up GDRP, one of our international guests also asked the question, is privacy by design included in the US regulations?
Well, I mean, I think for sure. I mean, it's, I don't want to go down this rabbit hole, but, but yeah, I mean, I think it's, we're seeing overseas, I think CCPA was kind of pivoted a little differently, where, overseas, you certainly have to opt in, where in California it's opt out, which is obviously a lot different. But I think, the best practices that we've certainly been instituting, and you're seeing brands do it here too, is really taking that opt-in philosophy. The guest should ultimately be the one that tells you whether they want to consent or not. And I think if brands take that approach, you're only going to set yourself up for the long game, versus trying to circumnavigate where the systems are today.
So, Alan, I suspect you have an opinion on this, but again, Warwick has given a final word there that leads into something you might want to comment on, because I have a feeling you pretty much know some strategies behind getting people to opt in.
Sure. Yeah. Getting people to opt in. And I agree 100% with Warwick. You want the opt in and not the opt out, right? Part of it comes down to, one, what is that carrot that you're going to get them to opt in with? And that's really restaurant marketing 101. Is there some level of experience or offer or product to entice them? And I'd say that's what a lot of brands do. What a lot of brands don't go far enough in is, what is that next journey though? And so how do you get them to that second, that third, that fourth visit? It's really about, I call it funnel management. And if you want guests to be loyal and you want them to stay opt-in and stay engaged with your brand, then you have got to figure out how to move them along that journey from that first experience. And that's how you build loyalty. It's not a points-based system. There's no silver bullet to it. But once you have them opted in, if you want to keep them, then you've got to continue to give them good experiences and provide value to them. And it may be different by guest. You've got to try different ways and have different paths. So that's my belief on how you keep people, how you get them opt in, and then how you keep them.
Yeah, one of the things you can learn in our industry is from other industries, right? And I do recall when people were very upset that the data was coming in or being held by other people in the hotel and airline industry, because you could go ahead and just name your price line, or other people like that, and not even know the brand and then get assigned. And really, once a person got there, it was up to the hotel or airline to give them an experience to get them to opt in and stay in there. Yep. I think some people were, prior to COVID, concerned about that in the food service industry, either in full service with table reservations or with online ordering coming from other sources. But today we get that data. And so there's sometimes too much data. And this is actually for all of our panelists. At one point, people wanted to have line level data on every individual thing that was sold and every little bit and byte. And what were they going to do with it? Well, I think Don or Warwick, one of you mentioned artificial intelligence and predictive. What is our panel's perspective on some tools when you have too much data, but to really predict and get down there? Anyone?
I'll go first, if you will. I'm a proponent of having that line level data, as you described it, accessible, but there is a cost. And if you can't justify the ability to maintain it, but by having it, you have ultimate access to information. But you're right, you've got to have some assistance, machine learning and otherwise, to really bring it out and say, we know the pattern that this detailed data gives us about a customer and what they're likely to do next. And if we can do that, this comes back to the very beginning when we said one-to-one marketing. All right, what's the most likely offer that customer will respond to positively? And if we can make that work through technology, which I think the technologies now exist, your data just becomes smarter and smarter. But the best seed you have, I still think, is that detail, if you can afford to maintain it and keep it. It's in the point of sale systems, right? So it's there at some point. The question is how long, and how long is it of use to you?
It's in the point of sale system, but it's not necessarily down at the point of sale anymore. So perhaps right. So the access today versus 5 years ago, if we had all this happen, we're not thinking about how to put that in place. Alan or Warwick, do you want to comment on this? And then we're going to move to our breakouts.
Yeah, happy to. On that, I think it's like Don said, it's all about the predictive analysis in there, and being able to pull that data to be able to connect it with other points of data, and then help it predict a little bit of what you think that person's going to do. And I think a lot of brands historically, when you look back maybe 3, 4, 5 years ago, we're really focused on, we've got to build this huge data set. And now we're starting to see the shift of, yes, we've got this line level data, but if we can get to 40% of what we're looking for, then let's start building that predictive engine. And I always talk about it as a snowball. You need to start the snowball and roll it and roll it, roll it. It's going to get bigger and bigger. Don't wait till you have 100% of what you need. And so that's my philosophy with it, is start with less and start rolling that snowball.
Great. Warwick, you get to close out this part of the session and provide your comment on this last question.
Yeah, I mean, I think, the guys kind of, summarized it well. I mean, I think there's so much data that's accessible to everybody. Like I'd mentioned, it's really not the issue. It's, again, getting down to really everybody here knows their business and kind of ultimately where, the guests are interacting the most, or what's really going to be driving the business. So I think when you've honed in on those areas of opportunity, again, it's just understanding, like, what are the levers that are fundamentally going to get the guest to engage. and then understanding how do I get them to re-engage. I mean, and so that data is accessible, and machine learning can help, speed up that process to help brands understand, hey, look, we've got a cohort of users that are more applicable to potentially, SMS, as the channel of truth, source to really get them to engage, because maybe they're lunch consumers, and that's the type of insight that's available now, which just wasn't there 10 years ago. So.
Great. Well, listen, I want to thank our panelists, at least for the first part here. You'll see our panelists have provided their emails on here if you want to contact them. We got to most of the questions, but listen, part of the fun of this whole thing is going to be as we shift over into our breakouts. But I also want to make sure that that we thank our title sponsor, Fortinet, but also Cognizant, our platinum sponsor, and of course, Amada and Infor, who have sponsored as well. But I will tell you that, interestingly enough, I'm pretty sure that the discussion in our breakouts, which include our supplier partners as well, is going to be rather interesting, since they're very focused on the use of data and how people are doing it, and also the data security, which came up. So thank you to our panelists again. That's going to take us to the breakout sessions. And let me just go over this again, how we're going to do it. You'll be randomly broken out in the sessions, and we have facilitators in each room that have some questions. We're going to have about 20 minutes, and we would like you to continue the conversation. We would ask that when you go to the breakout, as long as you're not sitting at home in your pajamas or something, that you turn on your video camera so you can see your fellow breakout members, and continue that discussion. Our facilitators will take you through it, take some notes, and then when we join back up in about 20 minutes, you'll have the opportunity to hear what the different groups are doing. It's going to take us a minute as we shift you into your breakout session, so we'd wait for you to get started, because we're going to need to move some people around. And if you have a drink, you can certainly have it when you're there too. So let's go ahead and go into the breakouts, and then we'll see you at the end of the sessions. So we're going to go ahead and just shift over to our facilitators and ask them to give a report on the discussion that you had. And I know in our room, it certainly continued, which was great. And I'm thinking about who I should put on the spot first, but Lauren, I'm going to put you on the spot first.
Sure, I'm happy to help. So I was fortunate enough to be in a room with two of the speakers, as well as our international question asker. So we were able to really continue the conversation regarding policy or privacy, excuse me. And we were talking a lot about the appropriateness of sending emails for people to opt in or opt out of regarding marketing related emails or operational related emails. And then we were talking about how COVID contact tracing and the communications that are required for that come into play. We also discussed a lot about how people are communicating with their customers in more functional ways, because you understand the context of the content you're trying to put out there. And you're quite frankly talking to your customer almost twice as much as you would have pre-COVID during the course of a single transaction. And obviously contactless delivery had created a major increase in the communication that was required for that. We also talked about how the shift to digital channels allows you to have increased communication because you also have increased data. You get to discuss how to have and provide a safe experience for your guests and so on. And then finally, we talked a little bit about how communicating with your employees has changed essentially completely because of COVID. You're requiring much more constant communication to ensure that everyone's on the same page regarding safety protocols and standards, and that you're making sure that there is a safe environment provided not only for your customers, but for your employees as well.
Great. Well, thank you. So Donna, being the professor here from Penn State in charge, I think we're going to let you go second.
Well, I like Lauren. Thank you, Rob. I had a great group, and we first dug in because we had Dawn in our another speaker, Dawn in our session, our breakout. So we dug into something that he talked about in terms of the framework around compliance and data. We talked a little bit about how there needs to be mindset of like the guardrails and using those, because I don't play a lawyer on TV or in real life. So I want guidance on that, right? We talked a little bit, I don't always hear rocket science and pizza in the same sentence. So we talked a lot about data stewardship. That was an interesting conversation, that it has legs, not just in the usage, business case usage and making smart decisions with it, but also the legal aspects and compliance and security and privacy, and then using it so that it's successful with your customers and it resonates with them. That was for sure. And we talked a lot also, I think, about how the pandemic has accelerated some data collection, and now we need some of that space and talent to analyze and make good use of it as well. And we began to talk about employees. And of course, I'll make a pitch that we produce fantastic, smart graduate students and undergrads who can do that analysis. So feel free to reach out anytime. But it was a great conversation. Thank you.
Great, thank you. And Lo, I'm going to turn it over to you to wrap up our reports today.
Thank you. I mean, I'm going to repeat quite a lot of the things we have heard earlier on, and the group was really interesting as well. So that was a great breakout. But security, accelerated, data, so much data. What do you do with those data? How do you analyze those data? And we're talking about also all that AI, which of course was there, is coming even more here today. And I think that's one of the topic of 2021, definitely. One of the elements which was interesting as well was hearing what, quite a few of the operators with us on the breakout were mentioning what they had started, their move towards bringing technology, and good they had, because they were about to launch certain things and things got launched, and it really allowed them to be out there and to do better in that survival mode, everybody or many of you had to go into. So that was definitely something interesting. There is also, of course, the element of customer behavior changing and has changed, and how will it change or continue for the tomorrow of things. When we talked about the employee, it was mentioning, well, we have got apps for our customers, why not for our employees? So there is definitely that angle going into that element. For the rest, it's more, everybody has been working so hard on being in that survival mode. There is maybe not so much. At this point, we have realized of what could they want to have in their work environment in the future, but probably again, a topic to discuss in 2021 as we move along in our progress in dealing with the pandemic.
Great, well, thank you. And thank you to each of our facilitators for leading that discussion. Clearly the opportunity to talk amongst ourselves really turns out very well. We can start the subject. And I do want to say that the subjects really do continue all year long. We are in a journey right now of some of these things, and a lot of these things we didn't know about, and a lot of these opportunities that have come from much more data create some challenges, certainly in the security areas and some things, and how to use it, but create a lot of opportunity for us as well. And it's a conversation I'm sure is going to continue into the next year. I want to thank again each of our facilitators. I want to thank our speakers. And once again, I want to thank our sponsors, our platinum sponsor, Cognizant, and our silver sponsors, Armada and Infor, and certainly our title sponsor for both of our sessions, Fortinet and Craig and Courtney. I don't know if you'd like to say a couple words of as well.
Yeah, and again, I think there was a very engaging conversation today, much like the last one as well. So I want to thank everybody for joining, the panelists, the speakers, everybody, and just say that we really truly value the partnership that we have with the IFBTA and the NRA, and we appreciate the opportunity to sponsor events like this. In fact, the Fortinet retail team is now fully certified food service professionals through the IFBTA CFTP program. We continue to evolve in our strategies and platforms to make sure that we're bringing the right solutions to bear to protect retail and restaurants. And again, as a former restaurant technology leader, holds a special place in my heart as well. So I have a vested interest in protecting restaurants. If you want to learn more about Fortinet solutions for retail, you can visit fortinet.com/retail, or to reach the retail team, you can drop us a line at retail@fortinet.com. Again, appreciate everybody for joining, and thank you, Rob.
Great. And before we sign off, I just want to remind you that this session is going to be on the IFBTA and the National Restaurant Association website. There is a lot of resources available from both organizations as well, and there will be a follow-up report. And with that, this is really a great gathering brought together by the Restaurant Association. So, Lo, I'm going to leave it to you to close this out today.
Yeah, I just want again to say thank you, everyone. Obviously, we are about to close in few weeks on a very strange year, but there is also some interesting and good things to take out. And I wish you for all the best on this, and hope to see many of you in the new year for some future session and get together. Thank you. Have a happy holiday and stay safe.